Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the brand new Tier 8 Polish Premium Medium Tank. It is the reward of the upcoming marathon, which starts today. It is the CS-52 LIS. And can you guess what possibly LIS might mean inside Polish? Oh, we're certainly going to have to be very cunning if we want to be able to play this tank correctly. Firstly, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of the statistics of this tank to show you what is exceptional about it, what isn't so good, how it stacks up to its opponents, and then I'm going to follow it up with a double helping of gameplay. Oof! I'm excited. Let's get started. So before we compare the CS-52 to its standard Tier 8 tech tree counterpart, the CS-53, and the two very popular Soviet medium tanks, the T-44-100 and the T-54 Mod 1, let me tell you that the statistics that are currently on TanksGG are slightly outdated, and that's because in a micro patch that Wargaming released this week, they buffed the statistics of the CS-52 since we've been previewing the vehicle as content creators. So Wargaming have decided to buff the engine power of the tank by 100 horsepower before you're even going to be able to get your hands on it, the gun depression by 1 degree to 7 degrees, and significantly buff the gun handling of this vehicle both when turning the turret and also when turning the tank. And so keep that in mind as we take a look at the statistics of this vehicle compared to some of its competition. So immediately we notice that the CS-52 has a very impressive damage per minute. 2000 is not quite as good as the CS-53, but it's definitely still up there as one of the higher damage per minute medium tanks at Tier 8. It's not going to compete with Tier 9. It's definitely not going to compete with Tier 10, but it's no slouch. The penetration of this vehicle at 208 is also pretty darn decent as well. It's not quite as high as a CS-53, but it's not as bad as the other premium medium tanks that we have in this comparison. The vehicle also has premium rounds at its disposal with 252 millimeters of APCR that also have incredible shell velocity at 1,569 meters a second. And while they don't carry that 290 millimeters of penetration punch that the heat rounds do on the CS-53, yeah, I'd probably rather have the shell velocity personally. The alpha damage of this vehicle really is one of the highlights of the tank. 320 means that you're going to be hitting hard with every single shot, and this allows you to out-trade other medium tanks and even trade up against vehicles like the T-32. Tier 8 heavy tanks have this much alpha, quite a few of them, and for that to be on a medium tank is very powerful without having the hindrance of having really awful gun handling on vehicles like the T-34-3. So let's move on to the gun handling, and remember, the dispersion values of this vehicle have been buffed when moving to 0.14, when turning the tank to 0.14, and when turning the turret to 0.08, which means that this vehicle actually has the best turret traverse dispersion in this comparison, and much better dispersion when moving than the CS-53 and the T-54 Mod 1, and it's kind of on par with the gun handling of the T-44-100, and we all know just how good the gun handling is on that Soviet medium tank. The accuracy at 0.36 is definitely not bad for such a high caliber gun which packs 320 alpha damage, and you'll do okay at sniping at decent distances. So remember, the gun depression of this tank has been buffed up to 7 degrees, putting it on par with the T-44-100 and the T-54 Mod 1, although it is 1 degree worse than the CS-53. Now let's look at the mobility of this tank. 50 forwards, 20 backwards, not quite as good as the T-44-100, but still decent enough to be able to get around. And remember, with that engine power buff that this vehicle received of 100 horsepower, that actually means that the power to weight ratio of this tank will be 19.68, which means that it has better power to weight ratio than the CS-53. This will also impact the traverse speeds of the tank, so they are on par with all of the other vehicles in this comparison as well. As remember, that raw engine power increase will also affect the traverse speed of the tank. All in all, this pretty much means that the CS-52 is hitting harder with more penetration and equal or higher firepower than the T-44-100 and the T-54 Mod 1, and kind of keeps up with the two tanks with regards to the gun handling and the mobility of the vehicle. So now let's take a look at the armor and the health of the CS-52. And this is where the news is pretty darn good. The vehicle has 80mm of frontal hull protection like the CS-53, but 75mm of side protection. This means you can side scrape against anything in this tank as long as you don't angle, and you'll be able to ricochet them. Of course, with that fairly thin upper hull armor, they will be penetrating that upper hull if you overexpose it, And of course you will have to if you want to get your gun on the target as well. What really is one of the highlights of this tank, however, is the turret armor. 190 means that you will be able to go hull down against all tier 6 and most tier 7 tanks without taking any damage. And apart from the 2 cupolas on top of the tank, which are only 100mm thick and very flat, fairly easy to hit, unless of course the tank is using its 7 degrees of gun depression, its turret armor is fairly decent. You've got 207mm just to the left and to the right of the cheeks, and outside that it kind of goes up to a very decent amount. You might even be bouncing some tier 8s, 9s and 10s with that kind of turret armor. All in all, I'm very impressed with the armor of the CS-52. For such a hard-hitting mobile tank, it does feel certainly more like a Soviet medium tank than the CS-52 did with that god-awful turret. Sorry, the CS-53 did, I mean, with that god-awful turret. Basically, the CS-52 is looking like it's significantly better than the CS-53 now. Although, of course, having that little bit of a rate of fire and the penetration advantage on the CS-53 and that 1 extra degree of gun depression might be preferable for some of you out there. So to round it all off, this vehicle is a little bit taller than the other vehicles in this comparison. It has slightly worse camouflage due to it. Combine this with a 20% chance to be set on fire, and you'd have to be quite bold to be giving up the fire extinguisher on this tank. You will go up in smoke a lot, so invest in a fire extinguishing crew on your mediums if you really want to use this thing with the bread with smarlets and to forego that fire extinguisher. A final mention should be made to the view range of the vehicle, which is 380, like all of the other 3 tanks in this comparison. That's not wonderful, but again, it's not awful. You're really going to have recon, situational awareness on your commander, and importantly, you're going to have to be using coated optics on this tank unless you want to give them up by using a premium consumable and having Brothers in Arms and every other view range enhancement to be able to drop those coated optics to use vents instead. A lot of you will be thinking about using the CS-52 LIS as a crew trainer, and you'll be happy to know that it is absolutely perfect for training up your CS-63 crew. So your commander is also the radio operator, so make sure you've got situational awareness and recon on them. Now, with regards to equipment slots on this tank, it's where things get a little bit more tricky. The vehicle actually has a mobility slot, and so there could be an argument that you would use a turbocharger on this vehicle to enhance the speed a little bit, but I really feel with the view range of the tank, even fully pimped out like I have it, with bread with smarlets and using Bond coated optics, combined with a crew with Brothers in Arms, situational awareness, and fully reconned out, I can only get up to 482 meters view range. Look, that's very good, but if you really want to spot your opponents, the light tanks and the medium tanks, and even the more sneaky tank destroyers at decent distances, I can't really imagine giving up coated optics on this tank and even replacing them with vents, even if you're a pay-to-win player like this setup is here with the bread with smarlets. And so I personally would probably go with the classic loadout on this tank. Gun rammer, coated optics, vertical stabilizers, enhance that aim time and really punish your opponents without sitting still for too long. But anyway, I think that's quite enough talking and theory crafting. Let's get stuck into some gameplay. Alright, so first up we're going to be inside a nice matchup here against tier 8 and tier 7 tanks with 2 self-propelled guns on Ensk. Ensk, pretty flat map. We're not going to really be able to use too much of the 7 degrees of gun depression on this tank. And this was the very first game that I played in the vehicle. So you see me actually trying to test out to see exactly what the gun handling is like on the vehicle here. How much depression we have, how much elevation we have. Just trying to get used to it to see what we can do on a ridgeline. So what you're seeing here is the advantage that you will get by using coated optics on the vehicle. We're spotting all of these tanks at decent distances. And I really think that this tank wants to work ridgelines. Why would you want to play a vehicle that has 7 degrees of gun depression if you could just use another heavy tank, for example, with less gun depression and better turret and better upper hull armor? I think this thing wants to try and work the ridges. I think this thing wants to try and poach out its opponents at decent distances. There are lots of more aggressive medium tanks in the game, but I think that this one really has to specialize with exposing that turret and just taking the fight to the enemy team. I think it's quite a good aggressive tank, especially in a matchup like this. A lot like how I would play my T-44-100 or my T-54. And we are taking chunks out of this FV-201. This doesn't feel like tier 8 medium tank alpha damage. This is the kind of alpha damage that I love on my T-54, the tier 9 Soviet medium tank. To have this at tier 8 is absolutely awesome. And with their gun handling from the vertical stabilizers and all of the crew skills we have on the tank, we are just absolutely ripping through our opponents. So I'm hoping this one's going to go through the turret armor of the FV201. It doesn't quite manage to. And you can see just how awesome it is to have a Polish medium tank that kind of feels a lot more like a Soviet medium tank in that kind of a position. We're using the ridgeline to angle our upper hull armor upwards and to hide our lower plate, and that allows us to be able to ricochet our opponents at least occasionally. But remember, this tank isn't all about bouncing. It's also got a really gnarly gun as well. And so that's what I'm trying to use against my foes here. I'm really trying to outshoot them as well as and outmaneuver them as well as I am with trying to out-tank them as well. So I was worried that the Progetto 46 was going to come around the corner. I noticed that the FV201 is aiming at other players here. And so I'm going to come around the corner and see if we can manage to give him a big old slap. And that is it. 297 in pretty much every other medium tank apart from things like the Lansen. That I would have had to have shot him twice. In a vehicle like this, with its 320 alpha damage, we would have to be a serious underdog to not be able to finish off the tier 7 British heavy tank in that scenario. Alright, so we've got a GW Panther here. I could shoot through the wall, but I don't fancy the RNG. And now I'm going to use the wall to protect myself from the GW Panther, and now I'll shoot through the wall. He obviously thinks, oh, I'm not going to be able to get in behind the wall, so instead he turns around to engage the E25, and a great bit of teamwork there. The E25 pushes through the flank, finishes him off. I'm going to come around the corner and out-trade this Progetto. The Progetto, probably the best tier 8 medium tank in the game right now, with the buffs that the vehicle received effectively with the gun rammer becoming for free on the tank. And we utterly dominate them there. A couple of shots in. I'm thinking about shooting the tracks. Why not just go for the weaker part of the tank and not stand any chance of bouncing off the side armor of the Ferdinand there. And immediately we're up to 3,000 damage in the first 3 minutes of this battle, with also 3 kills. And we have the mobility, a lot like the C-25, to get stuck in quickly to try and mop up the heavies. We've won our flank. Now we get the victorious pincer maneuver here. I'd be very surprised if we were to lose this game, so let's see how well the CS-52 is able to clean up in this scenario. Because in the end, you're probably going to want to buy this tank or grind the marathon to be able to get this tank to make the fat credits, right? Okay, so Tiger, stock Tiger. Oh, that makes me a little bit sad to be shooting that in my tier 8 premium. All right, we want to turn left to try and drag the Renegade round the corner. We bait him out there. He fires, so I'm going to swing round. And I don't want to shoot the Renegade. I want to finish off the medium tank in case he starts engaging me. Then what I want to do is go and give him the good old Christian side hug here to be able to finish off the Renegade and to use most of our armor. And just like that, first 4.5 minutes of this battle, 3,500 damage and 7 kills. Now, has the armor kept us in it to win it? Yeah, I mean, it's blocked 480. Is it something that I would depend on inside this tank? Not against most of these tanks. Sure, if you're sitting there hull down and you're not exposing your hull armor like I was to be able to advance the situation, I could depend on it against the tier 6 and tier 7 tanks. Look at it like this. It's not a glass cannon like the Lansen. If I bounce in the Lansen, oh, I'm so thankful. In a tank like this, you can definitely depend on the armor a little bit more against a lot more tanks, and that goes a long way without sacrificing the alpha damage that you have on the Lansen for 320. And that has allowed me to be able to pick apart my opponents one by one. And right now, I'm on the hunt to see if we can get a Radley Walters medal in our first ever game in the CS-52 LIS. And here we go. Should be able to bounce this guy off my... Hold on. This wasn't in the script. What was this? I didn't get the Radley Walters medal in my first game. The armor didn't work out for me. What's that all about? So using Battle Hits, which is available on my mod pack, which is currently only being distributed on my Twitch channel. So if you still want to access my mod pack, come over on Twitch and use the command !mod pack in the chat to be able to get the latest version. This was actually the round as to where the tank hit me from the Peter, the Italian tier 7 medium tank there. He actually shot me in the upper hull. I wasn't quite angling enough. If I had been angling, I probably would have been able to bounce the shot. I didn't think that they could even see my hull. I thought that they could only see my turret. Bit of a disappointment there. Otherwise, I might have been able to take down the Radley. But still, a cracking first game for this tank. I can't say no to 7 kills. Look, we've seen how the tank plays against equal and lower tiered opponents. Let's see how it performs inside those awful matchups against the tier 9s and the tier 10s. All right, round 2 fight. Now the worst possible matchup against tier 10 tanks. But there's still a lot of tier 8s and tier 9s on the enemy team, and when you're hitting for 320 alpha damage, it doesn't take many shots to have a decent game inside a matchup like this. As you're going to see in the post-game stats, I'll show you both games after this round, so you can see how well the vehicle performed with regards to its income. Spoilers, it's pretty good. It's pretty good when you're hitting things for 320, and the actual rounds on this tank are not too expensive either. So we've rushed into position, we've put a big old round into the IS-3, we're spotting the Lynx. Can we finish him off with a subsequent shot? Well, maybe not if a Lynx dives up on my team to absorb the shot that was intended for the Lynx on the enemy team. Okay, I don't know how the guy just rushed into me there, but whatever. Maybe they just really wanted to get into that bush, although they came into the bush from forwards. Whatever, just French things, right? We've managed to put a couple of rounds now into the T-44. We put one for good measure into the T-57 Heavy, and just a great start for this tank. The gun handling on the vehicle feels decent with the buffs that Wargaming have made to it, combining that with vertical stabilizers. While you're going to be a little bit slower than if you'd use the turbocharger on this tank, and statistically everything about the vehicle will be a little bit worse than if you'd use vents on the vehicle, I think it's probably worth it. I would probably use vertical stabilizers on this tank. I've been really enjoying how dynamic the vehicle is. It feels like an all-round dynamic tank. And being able to put in clutch shots like that, you can't really put a number on that. You can't put a number on clutch shotting. You can't put a number on managing to be dynamic, to get forwards, to take the fight to the enemy team, and those are things that you still can only really do with good, soft statistics, but importantly, with vertical stabilizers as well. So 1390 pushes out. He plays really well there. GG 1390, good stuff. Puts a couple of shots into us with his APCR rounds, and then decides to keep moving instead of getting hit by me. But we put a round into the side of the turret of the UDES-16 there. And it feels so good to be putting in these 357 alpha damaged bombs to higher tier medium tanks. And we're still only firing our regular rounds as well, of course against these lightly armored tanks. I'm hoping that my team is going to assist me against this 1390. And we put another round into the back of his tank. Now I've shot him a couple of times. We got even for the couple of times he shot me, and the T-54 Mod 1 finishes him off, which I am super happy about. Do you know why? Because that means that now I can flank up and hopefully deal with all of these tanks. I don't have to worry about the 1390 handling me. Aiming up at the side of a Soviet turret. Didn't quite work out there. If I'd fired gold, maybe I could have bent him if I'd hit the turret ring, possibly. And that VK, is it me or is the VK looking at us with pretty hungry eyes right now? I think this VK is. I think this VK is thinking, oh dear, this game isn't going too good, but at least I can prey on the Polish medium tank. We bounce off him. He figures out, oh whoops, did I just drive out in front of 3 tanks? Yes, you did, bud. And I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to fire my first gold round in this vehicle right up into the crown of the VK100-01P. Oh, how the crown weighs heavy on that vehicle's head. We shut him down and we move on. We're already up to 4,000 combined in the first 3.5 minutes of this game. This alpha damage, this DPM, this mobility, this vehicle is a powerful all-rounder. A lot like the T-44-100, a lot like the T-54 Mod 1. I think the gun is just a little bit better than those tanks. It's like those vehicles that either sacrifices a little bit of mobility compared to the T-44-100 to be able to gain a little bit of gun performance, or it sacrifices, in the case of the T-54 Mod 1, a significant amount of the armor of that tank to be able to gain extra mobility and gun performance. And that is where the CS-52 LIS really lies. It is a tank. It's not as heavily armored, or it's not as mobile as the Soviet premium medium tanks, but it is an absolute performer with the extra gun performance. No other way to say it, really. I love the Lancer. Any of you who have watched my YouTube channel, well, you are watching my YouTube channel right now, so you probably have watched my YouTube channel at least at one point. But if you've seen my Lancer videos, you'll know how much I love the alpha damage and the gun depression on that Swedish medium tank. And I feel like it's happening all over again right here, right now, ladies and gents, with the CS-52 LIS. I really enjoyed my play session with this tank. I thought it's an absolute cracking medium vehicle. Do I think that it's absolutely broken OP? No, I don't think so. I think if you're a tier 6 tank, yeah, roll over. But to be honest, you're rolling over in a tier 6 tank against most vehicles. It still has weak points on top that are clearly pennable by any tiers that it faces. Its turret armor to the left and to the right of the gun are not great. Don't be fooled by this, I guess, dust cover. It's not actually very good armor. You can shoot to the left and to the right of this gun and you will be able to pretty much dominate the tank. Although, I must clarify upon post-review of that comment that it is spaced armor. So don't think that you can get away with firing high explosive rounds around this part of the tank. If you fire directly left of the gun, you've got an area which is 214 millimeters of space protection roughly. But if you can shoot just outside of that, if I put the visual comparison on here as well, you can see that this is a vulnerable area, this nice shiny bit just outside that kind of dust shield. And then just to the left and just to the right of the gun, you will be able to go through it. Don't shoot right on the edge of this kind of dust cover here, because that actually has 400 millimeters of effective armor in a tiny bar across it. So shoot either just to the left of the gun, or just to the right of the gun, or shoot on the shiny part. And obviously, the further you shoot to the left and to the right, the better the turret armor is going to get. But with a hull that can be penetrated by pretty much every single vehicle, again, apart from the tier 6s and tier 7s, I think it's a very good tank, but is it going to be the new overpowered vehicle that absolutely dominates all games? No, it isn't. But is it a fearsome contender to deal with on the battlefield that you should definitely not take for granted? Yeah, for sure. Don't think that you're going to be chewing this one up unless the player plays very badly indeed. So the results are high caliber and a top gun for the game on Ensk against the lower tier tanks. 7 kills, just shy of being able to get that ace tanker, and yeah, we made a fat ton of credits, although this was with I was running a credit booster at the time. I managed to complete a bunch of Wargaming's missions, but with the ammunition resupply being so darn low, considering the 320 alpha damage shell only costs 480 credits, yeah, it's a pretty monstrous vehicle for making money if, of course, you're not YOLOing those gold rounds left, right, and center. So the next round against the tier 10 tanks, once again an ace tanker like the first, although I'm pretty sure this one won't be an ace tanker after the vehicle goes to general release, but still 1,300 base, and on the previous game 1,300 base, 2 very solid rounds. We finished second on damage in the worst possible matchup, top of experience. We did fire, I think, a couple of gold rounds here, but still a cool 111,000 credits profit, as we did penetrate most of the rounds, and 4,000 damage is always a good result in the amount of time that these games occurred. So the next question that I'm sure a lot of you will have is, should I buy the CS-52 lease, or should I grind the 40, 50, 60, 70 hours that's going to take me over the next 10 days to be able to get this tank? Well, if you love foxes, you're probably already going to buy this tank, right? All jokes aside, it's a tricky one. The vehicle's very good. It's not too different to the T-44-100 and the T-54 Mod 1, however. And so if you already have those tanks, I don't really feel like you're going to gain too much by purchasing this vehicle. It's not like it's using the new mechanic that you have on the Tier 10 Polish medium tank, the CS-53, the turbo mode on that tank. It's not the fastest. It's not got the highest alpha damage at Tier 8 medium. It doesn't have the best armor at Tier 8 medium, doesn't have the best view range, doesn't have the best camo, doesn't have the best DPM, doesn't have the best anything at Tier 8 medium tank. But what this vehicle does do is perform admirably in all situations. It's a very powerful all-rounder, and to have the alpha damage with enough gun depression, with enough armor on this tank, with enough accuracy, with enough everything, it just works. Is it going to be the most overpowered tank in the game at Tier 8? No, I don't think so. Is it going to be a performer? Yes, it is. Is it worth playing World of Tanks a hell of a lot over the next 10 days to be able to get during the mission marathon? Look, that's only a decision that you can make depending on how much time you have. And I'm never going to comment about whether vehicles inside World of Tanks are worth the price tag, because in the end, it's your money, and who am I to tell you how you should spend it? All I can tell you is this is a solid medium tank. I don't think it's as good as a Progetto, but I think it's far better than something like a Super Pershing. And so if you love your Polish medium tanks, You probably don't have too many options unless you want to play the Poodle at tier 6 again and again and again. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was my full review of the CS-52 LIS. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, make sure you give it a thumbs down and let me know in the comments what you think about this tank. Do you think it looks 10 out of 10 incredible? Do you think it looks 10 out of 10 awful? Are you going to pick one up? Are you going to skip this one out? Are you now going to absolutely, utterly grind the mission marathon to be able to get your hands on this tank? And remember, you could complete a bunch of stages. If you were able to invest 20 hours over the next 10 days inside World of Tanks, you might be able to get a 50% discount off the vehicle. And that's where I guess it starts to become a little bit attractive. Anyway, that's it for me. Have a lovely rest of your evening. And remember, I'm going to be streaming my efforts to be able to get this tank for free over the next 10 days on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. So hopefully I'll see all of you there. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.